Hi everyone, I'm Troy again, and this is another edition of the Whiteboard Wafflings. So today I'm talking periodization and deloads. I'm not going to go too deep into this because there's loads of different periodization models that you can use. But basically periodization is the process of planning your training sessions to hit a certain goal and to avoid overtraining or under recovery, that kind of stuff. So for a lot of people, it's a missing ingredient. Like a lot of recreational athletes and people who just train recreationally don't really have a plan, and that's part of the reason why you're not really achieving the goals or the results that you want. The main reason that I personally use periodization is to avoid overtraining or under recovering and to avoid plateaus. You can apply this whether you're an endurance-based athlete or you're more of a strength-based athlete or a bit of both. But I'm going to be using the example of kind of like a strength training plan just to kind of illustrate this point a little bit. So what most people do, they'll start training, and quite often, we've all done it. You start a new plan, you do too much, too soon, and you run yourself into the ground and you hate it. And you probably end up hating yourself and hating life and everything else because you've just exhausted yourself and you've overdone it. A lot of people will just keep training and training and training and training and training, and they're getting weaker, and they're not getting any leaner, or whatever their goal might be, and they just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and keep adding and adding more and more and more, and eventually your body's going to break down. You can't handle that level of intensity and volume in your training. So yeah, generally what most people do is their volume and intensity will keep going up, and as that goes up, your recovery starts coming down because you're not giving yourself adequate recovery time. Your body's not adapting to that training stimulus, and then as a result, your results start coming down, and that's when those you hit plateaus and even start moving backwards. Reversibility sets in just because your body's not getting a chance to recover and adapt. It's not specifically the training stimulus itself that causes the adaptations. It's the recovery from that training stimulus where the adaptations set in. Particularly when you're talking about like getting stronger or bigger muscles or whatever. If you keep training your muscles, then they're not going to adapt and they're not going to get any bigger. It's the same with cardiovascular capacity. If you keep training yourself and never giving yourself a chance to recover, you're just not going to get any fitter. So that's where a kind of a periodized training plan comes into play. So, or the concept of a deload. So you'll do a training block and then you deload. A progressive training block. So if you look at my very kind of basic graph here, so I've got this zigzaggy line here. So these X's are where the deload occurs. So you have say a six week training block, say it could be 8 weeks, and it's progressive. So you're improving throughout that block, and then you have a deload, and you drop everything down a little bit, and then you have another training block, and you improve, and then you deload and you come down a little bit, and then you have a training block and you improve and you deload, and you see how that works. So you're giving your body a chance to recover and adapt to that training stimulus, and as a result, it's not linear, but as a result, you're improving the whole time. So I've got a very rough outline of a 6 week training block here. We've got 6 weeks, it's progressive, so it's going up in intensity each week. So we start with 65%, we end with 90%. This isn't anything, super scientific or anything like that. This is just, to illustrate the point. So that can be 65% of your RPE or your 1RM. So RPE is your rate of perceived exertion. So that's a scale of 1 to 10 if you're not aware of what RPE is. So that if you think that the absolute hardest level of effort you can possibly put in is a 10, and a 1 is like laying in bed watching television. So 65% is obviously around that 6 out of 10 mark, as an example. If it's a strength training plan, you probably want to be going with 1RM, which is your 1 rep max. So you work out what the maximum lift is in each of the main lifts, and then you work out your percentage of that for training. As a general rule, I don't tend to go with your absolute maximum lift when working this out. Okay, you want to always kind of train a little bit within yourself, because you don't want to be taxing your central nervous system too much. So it's not all about all or nothing. It's a little bit, you kind of have to grease that groove a little bit and kind of work within yourself and just keep pushing yourself and challenging yourself, but don't push yourself to the max all the time. So when you've got your 1 rep max, you reduce that by 90%. So if your 1 rep max in bench press is 100 kilos, you then go with 90 kilos and then a percentage of that 90 kilo for your training sets. So this progressive plan, week 1, you're training at 65% of RP or 1 RM. Week 2, 70%, week 3, 75, week 4, 80%, week 5, 85, week 6, 90%. So obviously, as a strength plan, your weight is going up, your reps are going to be coming down. You may be changing your sets slightly, so you might be starting off at 4, 5 or 6 sets, and then by the end you might be doing 3, maybe 4 sets, and up here you might be doing sort of 12 to 15 reps, and down here you might be doing 3 to 5 reps, something like that as an example. Within each kind of 6-week block, you might want to finish that off with a period max lift, or you might want to structure it so that you do 6 weeks deload, 6 weeks deload, 6 weeks deload, and then go for like a season or period max lift. Remember, your 1 rep max is the maximum that you can possibly lift. You're not going to break that every time you get in the gym. I like what Dan John says about it. So he says you have a max, and then a max, or something like that. So your max will be like your maximum lift or maximum effort for a training cycle. Your max will be your personal best within a year, say, and then your max is like your competition best. So that's when you push yourself beyond your normal limits, and that's kind of like a once or twice in a lifetime kind of effort. That's, if you're a power lifter and you're on the plate and you've just broken an age group national record or something, because the guy before you's just put an extra plate on, you've got one more lift to do, and you just dig deep and come up with something really special. So that's your max. So bearing in mind that your 1 rep max might not necessarily be the absolute maximum you can possibly do, but if you're doing, if you're training for any kind of competition and you're doing 1 RMs in training, then your training periodization is all wrong, because you should be saving those efforts for the competition. And that principle applies to endurance training as well, whether you're on the bike or you're running or whatever. That roughly explains what the training cycle might look like. So you do your progressive 6 weeks, say, cycle. You get to a period for a maximum lift or a maximum amount of intensity for that period, and then you have your deload. And the deload, you can just take a week off if you like, or do some different type of training for a week. So if you do predominantly strength training, maybe you do a lot of cardio that week, or you do kettlebells or lots of yoga, or you just go for lots of walks and do lots of stretching. If that's what works for you, do that. But the chances are, if you enjoy your training, you're not going to want to take a week off from it anyway, and you don't have to. So a deload generally is around 50% of your maximum volume. So if you're doing 4, 5, 6 sets of however many reps during this period, you can do the same level of intensity during your deload period. You just do half as much. So you do 2 or 3 sets instead of 5 or 6 sets. So your deload doesn't have to be a complete step away from training. It's just a roughly 50% reduction in total volume. So you're still training, but your body's getting a chance to kind of recover a little bit, because you're not maxing it out and you're not taxing your central nervous system too much. With periodization as well, obviously I've already kind of touched on that a little bit. You would try and structure your training plans towards a specific goal, and it will be time bound. So it might be competition of some kind. So if you're a bodybuilder, it would be, your training would be working up towards peak week before you step on stage in your smalls. If you're a power lifter, you're working up to stepping on the plate in competition. If you're a cyclist, then you're working towards your race day. So obviously you'll want to be deloading before the race, because you don't want to be doing race efforts during training, and you certainly don't want to be doing those kind of high intensity efforts a few days or even a week before your race. You want to be saving your body. Your training would be going up and up and up, and then you'd have a little taper, and then you'd have your competition or your race or whatever. So this is a really important thing to consider. If you want to take your training more seriously, if you want to stop plateauing and you want to start hitting your goals and improving, you've got to think about periodizing your training. So if you don't know how to do this, you can read books on it. The modern father of periodization is Tudor Bomper. So you can buy his book and learn more about periodization for sports and training and everything else. You can just buy or maybe download some training plans online. The Strong Lifts one is free. It's a very basic template. You can there's loads of different ones. There's always guys that are writing strength training programs for T Nation and stuff like that, so you can look at some of those and get some ideas, or you can go to a coach and get a coach to do a specific plan for your specific goals, and in time you might develop enough understanding to be able to do it yourself. But obviously the good thing about having a coach, in addition to them being able to kind of give you a specific training plan, a periodized training plan with deloads, they also give you accountability. You've got someone to be accountable to. So, a coach is always a good idea. Even Chris Froome has got a coach, do you know what I mean? They might not be as good on the bike as he is, but they certainly make him better. Okay, so it's a quick outline, a very, very basic outline of periodization and deloads. Remember, there are lots of different templates. There's linear periodization and daily undulating periodization and what have you. It doesn't really matter that much. It's whatever works best for you. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you. If you've got any questions, put them in the box. Don't forget to click like and share and subscribe and all that funky stuff. And I'll see you on the flip side. Laters.